On June 11, 2026, 3 days after American and Israeli strikes had reportedly eliminated what Pentagon briefers described as the primary operational command layer of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, a coordinated series of attacks occurred simultaneously against American logistics facilities in Iraq, a fuel depot supporting Israeli air operations in the Negev, and a maritime drone strike against a vessel operating in support of the Fifth Fleet in the northern Arabian Gulf. Hold on. 3 days after the primary IRGC command layer was reportedly eliminated, simultaneously, 3 separate theaters, 3 separate operational environments, each one requiring independent planning, independent logistics, independent execution capability. Either dead men planned and executed 3 simultaneous precision strikes across 3 countries, or what American intelligence identified and destroyed as the primary command layer was not the primary command layer. One of those 2 things is true, and today I'm going to show you which one and what it means for everything we thought we understood about this conflict. CNN is asking who ordered these strikes. Fox is asking whether the ceasefire is now dead. The BBC is asking about the diplomatic implications. All wrong questions. The right question is this: how do you build a military organization that can execute coherent, coordinated, multi-theater operations the day after its leadership is supposedly eliminated? In the next 23 minutes, I'm going to show you the specific architecture Iran built to answer that question, and I'm going to show you why American satellite surveillance, which is the most capable system ever deployed by any nation in history, was structurally unable to see it. I want to teach you one framework. I call it the shadow command architecture. And it is, in many ways, the logical culmination of everything Iran has been building since the IRGC was nearly destroyed by Iraqi chemical weapons in the 1980s. Let me explain it from first principles. Every military organization has 2 types of command structure. The first is the visible command structure. The generals, the headquarters, the command posts that appear in organizational charts, receive official communications, hold meetings that are detectable through signals intelligence, and whose locations can be established through a combination of human intelligence, signals intelligence, and satellite surveillance. This is the command structure that gets targeted in the opening phases of any American or Israeli strike campaign. It is designed to be targeted. It is, in a very specific sense, the decoy. The second type is the shadow command structure, a network of pre-positioned commanders, pre-delegated authorities, pre-established operational plans, and pre-cached logistics that can execute specified categories of operation without any communication with the visible command layer after the initial activation signal. The shadow command architecture is what happens when you take that second type of structure and build it with enough depth, enough redundancy, and enough operational specificity that it can function indefinitely after the visible command structure has been destroyed. Okay? The visible headquarters is not the brain. It is the face. The brain is somewhere else, and it was designed to work without a face. The historical anchor for this is not military history. It is the field of organizational behavior, specifically the work of Carl Weick at the University of Michigan on what he called high-reliability organizations. Weick studied organizations that operated in high-consequence environments, nuclear power plants, aircraft carriers, air traffic control, and identified the common feature of the ones that survived catastrophic disruptions. They had distributed decision-making protocols that allowed lower-level operators to execute correct actions without consulting higher-level authority when that authority was unavailable. Iran's IRGC, after the near-catastrophic experience of the Iran-Iraq War, in which centralized command nodes were repeatedly targeted and destroyed, built exactly this architecture into its organizational DNA. The lesson from Weick is that the most reliable organizations are not the ones with the best leaders. They are the ones that function correctly when the leaders are gone. Iran learned that lesson in blood between 1980 and 1988 and spent the next 35 years institutionalizing it. Let me give you 5 pieces of evidence for exactly how the shadow command architecture works and why it was invisible to American surveillance. Number 1, the pre-delegation protocol. According to captured documents analyzed by the Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center in Israel and described in detail in their 2024 report on IRGC organizational structure, the IRGC maintains a documented system of pre-delegated operational authorities. Specific commanders at specific levels of the organization have standing written authorizations to execute specified categories of operation upon the occurrence of specified trigger conditions, including the destruction of senior command nodes. These authorizations are not transmitted during a crisis. They were transmitted years ago. They exist as physical documents in hardened caches and as memorized protocols in the minds of commanders who have rehearsed them for years. The trigger condition for the operations we observed on June 11th was almost certainly the destruction of the visible command layer that occurred on June 8th. The 3-day delay was not hesitation. It was the minimum operational preparation time for 3 simultaneous multi-theater strikes, the time required to activate pre-positioned logistics, confirm target status, and synchronize timing. 3 days, not 3 weeks, 3 days. Does that make sense? Number 2, the underground communications architecture. The reason American signals intelligence did not detect the coordination of the June 11th strikes is not that the Shadow Command architecture does not communicate. It is that it communicates through channels that do not overlap with the communications infrastructure that American signals intelligence was optimized to monitor. Specifically, according to reporting from the Financial Times and from former National Security Agency officials speaking on background to multiple outlets in the years since the Snowden disclosures revealed American collection priorities to Iranian intelligence, the IRGC invested heavily after 2013 in a fiber optic military communications network that is physically buried and does not emit the radio frequency signals that American signals intelligence satellites collect. A communications network that does not use radio frequency emissions is invisible to signals intelligence collection from space, from aircraft, and from ground-based collection stations. You cannot intercept a fiber optic cable from orbit. The network exists. Traffic flows over it. Orders are transmitted. But from the perspective of American signals intelligence satellites, the network is as silent as a library. The Shadow Command architecture talks, but not in any frequency that American ears can hear. Number 3, the geographic dispersion of reserve commanders. Here is the specific feature of the Shadow Command architecture that I believe was most surprising to American analysts in the post-strike assessment period. Senior operational commanders in the Shadow architecture, the individuals who would activate and execute reserve operations in the event of visible command destruction, are not located at military facilities. They are located in civilian cover positions across the country and across the proxy network's geography. A brigade-level operational commander might be the manager of a religious foundation in Mashhad. A network coordinator might hold a position in a trading company in Baghdad. A logistics pre-positioning authority might appear to be a mid-level municipal official in Avaz. The civilian cover is not a disguise adopted when operations begin. It is a permanent, years-long operational identity that produces no military signatures, detectable by satellite or signals intelligence collection. American satellites look for military vehicles, military facilities, military communications, military personnel in military dress. The Shadow Command architecture's reserve layer produces none of those signatures because it is not operating as a military organization in peacetime. It is operating as a civilian organization that has memorized a set of military instructions it will execute when the time comes. You cannot see what does not look like what you are looking for. Number 4, the pre-cached logistics network. For the Shadow Command architecture to execute military operations without a visible logistics tail, without the vehicle convoys, supply movements, and facility activations that satellite reconnaissance would detect, the logistics must be pre-positioned before the conflict begins, in locations and quantities sufficient to sustain the specified operations. According to analysis from the Combating Terrorism Center at West Point, drawing on IRGC documents and procurement records, Iran has maintained a network of pre-positioned logistics caches across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen for at least a decade. These caches contain munitions, communications equipment, medical supplies, and operational planning documents. They are located in civilian structures, warehouses, agricultural facilities, religious buildings, in locations that have never appeared on any official military infrastructure list. The cost ratio here is extreme. The investment required to pre-position these caches over a decade of gradual logistics activity is a fraction of the investment required to reconstitute them under surveillance. Iran built the Shadow Command architecture's logistics layer slowly, quietly, one truck of supplies at a time across 10 years. It is invisible in any single satellite pass because no single satellite pass sees a military logistics operation. It sees a truck delivering goods to a warehouse. Multiply that by 10 years and 10 countries, and you have a logistics infrastructure that is as invisible as it is comprehensive. Let that sit for a moment. Number 5. The rehearsal program. The June 11th strikes were not improvised. They were rehearsed. The evidence for this is the precision and simultaneity of the execution. 3 separate strike operations in 3 separate countries, executed within a 40-minute window, targeting 3 separate categories of American and Israeli assets, using 3 different weapon systems: drones in Iraq, a cruise missile derivative in the Negev, and a maritime drone in the northern Gulf. The coordination required for this level of simultaneous, multi-domain, multi-theater precision is not achievable without extended rehearsal. According to former IRGC officers who have spoken to journalists at Der Spiegel and the Times of London over the past 3 years, the IRGC conducts what it describes internally as strategic resilience exercises, full-scale simulations of post-decapitation operations in which the Shadow Command architecture's reserve layer executes pre-delegated operational plans as if the visible command structure had been destroyed. These exercises, conducted in civilian terrain under civilian cover, produce no signatures detectable as military exercises by American surveillance systems. The rehearsals look like nothing. The real operation, when it comes, looks like a miracle of improvisation. It is not improvisation. It is the product of a decade of invisible practice. Now, I want to give you the strongest possible argument against my framework. The Steelman goes like this. The Shadow Command architecture, as I have described it, assumes a level of organizational coherence, institutional continuity, and operational security that is extremely difficult to maintain over decades across multiple countries and thousands of personnel. Leaks happen. Human intelligence sources penetrate organizations. People defect, get arrested, get turned. The argument holds that American and Israeli intelligence services, which have demonstrated the ability to penetrate IRGC-linked organizations at levels that produce the assassinations of senior IRGC commanders and nuclear scientists over the past 15 years, almost certainly have significant penetration of the shadow architecture as well, penetration that shapes targeting in ways that are not publicly disclosed. Furthermore, the argument goes, the 3 strikes on June 11th, while tactically impressive, did not achieve strategic effects proportionate to the coordination they required. They were significant enough to be politically embarrassing. They were not significant enough to alter the military balance. A shadow command architecture that can only produce tactically embarrassing but strategically marginal operations is a more limited capability than I'm implying. Now, that's a serious argument. But here's what it cannot explain. It cannot explain why, despite 15 years of documented IRGC penetration operations that produced the deaths of multiple senior commanders, the organization has continued to expand its geographic reach and operational capability rather than contract. Every penetrated organization that loses key leaders either collapses or adapts. The IRGC adapted consistently and rapidly in ways that suggest the penetration did not reach the institutional protocols of the shadow architecture. The kills were real. The institutional continuity was uninterrupted. That pattern is only consistent with a command structure that is genuinely separate from the individuals being killed. And the Steelman cannot explain the simultaneity of the June 11th strikes, tactically marginal they may have been, simultaneously executed across 3 theaters using pre-positioned assets 3 days after the visible command layer was destroyed. That simultaneity is the proof of concept. That is the Shadow Command architecture, demonstrating that it works. Here is the synthesis. The Shadow Command architecture is Iran's institutional answer to the American doctrine of decapitation, the assumption that destroying leadership nodes destroys organizational capability. Iran built an organization that is specifically designed to continue functioning after its leaders are killed, because it built the leadership decisions into the organization in advance. The commands were issued years ago. The logistics were positioned years ago. The rehearsals happened years ago. The only thing that needed to happen on June 11th was for surviving commanders in civilian cover in 3 separate countries to begin executing plans that already existed. The visible IRGC command layer that was destroyed was not the brain. It was the mask the brain wore to give American targeting something to aim at. The patient giant reading the board and collecting the winnings. China. The People's Liberation Army has been studying IRGC, organizational doctrine, since the early 2000s through military-to-military exchange programs and through analysis of IRGC published doctrine. The Shadow Command Architecture's principles: pre-delegated authority, civilian cover, pre-positioned logistics, underground communications, rehearsed post-decapitation protocols, map directly onto concepts in PLA military doctrine described in their publicly available Science of Military Strategy. China is not just watching Iran apply these principles. China is incorporating them into how the PLA would function if American strike campaigns targeted Chinese command infrastructure in a Taiwan scenario. The patient giant does not just read the board, it copies the playbook. 3 things to watch in the next 48 to 72 hours. First, watch whether the United States designates additional individuals or entities under executive order sanctions relating to the June 11th strikes. New designations would reveal the edge of American understanding of the Shadow Architecture's organizational map, and the targets they choose tell you whether they have found real nodes or are still mapping the visible layer. Second, watch communications from Kataib Hezbollah and similar Iraqi militia organizations about operational status. Their statements about whether they consider themselves bound by the Iran ceasefire will indicate how much independent operational authority the Shadow Architecture has delegated to them. Third, watch whether any new satellite imagery analysis services publish assessments of activity at facilities in Iran, Iraq, or Syria that were not previously flagged as military infrastructure. New signatures at previously civilian categorized facilities would indicate the Shadow Architecture's logistics layer activating. Your homework: go find the Combating Terrorism Center at West Point's most recent publication on IRGC organizational structure, freely available at their website at ctc.westpoint.edu. Then find the Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center's analysis of IRGC command protocols. Put them side by side and look for the gap between what the organizational chart shows and what the operational behavior implies. That gap is where the Shadow Command Architecture lives. Prove me wrong in the comments. Tell me where I have overstated the coherence of an architecture that must function across multiple languages, multiple countries, and multiple organizational cultures while maintaining operational security for decades. I want that argument. Here is the question I want to leave you with. If an organization can be designed to function correctly after its leaders are killed, if the decisions are embedded in the institution rather than residing in the individuals, then what precisely does it mean to defeat that organization? I will see you in the next one.